At first glance, the Strait of Gibraltar seems like a trivial obstacle. Just 14 kilometers separate the shores of Europe and Africa. On clear days, you can see Moroccan towns shimmering across the Mediterranean from southern Spain. So why hasn't anyone built a bridge? It all begins with what lies beneath. The strait is deceptively deep. The central channel plunges down more than 900 meters, with sudden underwater cliffs and ridges carved over millions of years by tectonic forces. It's one of the few places on Earth where two continental plates collide, the African plate and the Eurasian plate, causing earthquakes, shifting rock, and unstable seabeds. These conditions aren't just difficult, they're catastrophic for megastructures. Any potential bridge would need to span one of the most geologically active areas in the world. Earthquakes as strong as 6.3 magnitude have struck the region in the past century. A deep-sea bridge or tunnel would need to survive this for not just decades, but centuries. Then come the ocean currents. The strait is home to one of the world's most powerful tidal exchanges. Water from the Atlantic Ocean constantly rushes into the Mediterranean, while heavier, saltier Mediterranean water pushes outward below the surface. These cross-layered flows generate unpredictable turbulence, swirling eddies, and 40 kilometers per hour winds that can rock ferries and commercial ships. What does that mean for construction? Any bridge or tunnel must contend not only with vertical forces from the sea, but horizontal pressure from wind and current. Giant pylons might crack, foundations could collapse, concrete segments might shift over time. And because this is an open marine passage used by thousands of vessels daily, the margin of error is practically zero. We often hear the phrase, only 14 kilometers. But building across this stretch is more like building across a shifting, breathing fault line that's alive and watching you. The dream of connecting Europe and Africa is not new. More than 2,000 years ago, Roman engineers mapped out a road across the strait. The empire spanned both sides, Hispania and Mauritania, and Rome imagined a Mediterranean world under one rule, one law, one road system. But the Romans weren't suicidal. They understood the sea. They understood earthquakes. They settled for maritime dominance instead. Fast forward to the 20th century, a period of colonial ambition, technological optimism, and post-war reconstruction. As Europe rebuilt, attention turned to bold, futuristic ideas. Connecting continents by sea or land was suddenly within the realm of possibility. In 1930, a Spanish engineer named Fernando Gallego proposed a tunnel from Tarifa to Tangier, inspired by early sketches of the Channel Tunnel between Britain and France. His plan involved digging undersea from both sides, but he underestimated the geology. The project died before it began. In the 1950s, the Franco dictatorship in Spain flirted with a nationalist fantasy, connecting Spain to its colonial possession of northern Morocco. Such a bridge, they claimed, would symbolize Hispanic African unity under Spanish hegemony. But that dream was crushed by independence. Morocco reclaimed its land, and the idea of Spanish dominance was politically radioactive. Still, the desire to connect continents never died. Through the 1970s and 1980s, as globalization began to spread and Europe saw its future in cooperation, new proposals emerged. None more ambitious than what came in 1979. In 1979, Spain and Morocco signed an historic agreement. The goal: to explore the construction of a tunnel between their two nations. This was not a casual idea. Both governments formed joint engineering committees, hired geological consultants, and began preliminary seismic drills in the sea floor. The early designs resembled a submerged version of the Channel Tunnel, a rail tunnel, twin-bore, with emergency evacuation shafts and service corridors. The estimated length, over 40 kilometers, longer than the channel. The depth, nearly 400 meters underground. Spanish engineers hoped to use advanced boring machines, but the rock formations shocked them. Beneath the strait, they encountered layers of crushed sediment, shifting shale, and pockets of methane that made traditional tunneling techniques useless. Test shafts failed, drills snapped, seismic activity kept shaking the testing stations. Meanwhile, costs ballooned. What began as a $3 billion project quickly climbed to over $12 billion. And this was in the 1980s. But money wasn't the only problem. Spain was negotiating entry into the European Union. Morocco was struggling with internal political tensions and growing concern about migration from sub-Saharan Africa. Nationalists in both countries began to question, was this about connection or control? In 1995, after more than a decade of stalled reports and failed funding talks, the Spain-Morocco tunnel was quietly shelved. No public funeral, just silence. But the idea never truly disappeared. When engineers study the Strait of Gibraltar, the first thing they fear is not the water. It's what lies beneath. The Gibraltar Arc, the massive tectonic boundary beneath the Mediterranean, is one of the most complex and dangerous fault zones in the world. It's the geological border where the African plate crashes into the Eurasian plate. This slow-motion collision pushes the seabed, cracks the Earth's crust, and generates dangerous seismic activity. Every year, this invisible force moves continents by just a few millimeters. But sometimes, it releases its energy all at once in earthquakes. The 2004 Al Hoceima earthquake in Morocco, magnitude 6.3, killed hundreds and displaced thousands. That quake originated not far from the proposed bridge zone. Even minor tremors, experts say, could damage tunnels or underwater pylons in ways that would cost billions to fix, or worse, endanger lives. There's another issue: liquefaction. In certain conditions, seismic vibrations can cause sandy underwater sediment to behave like a liquid. Foundations shift, support columns collapse, bridges buckle. Building across the strait would mean battling not only massive pressure and strong tides, but an Earth that never sits still. And if that were not enough, there's the risk of tsunamis. A powerful undersea quake in the region could trigger a wall of water rushing into the Mediterranean, an echo of the Lisbon tsunami of 1755, which devastated cities along the Iberian coast. Any megastructure built here would have to endure tens of thousands of natural micro-events and survive the rare but inevitable major one. That's a design challenge no country has solved. Yet, still, we build. Humanity has a long history of doing the impossible. We've bridged seas, tunneled under mountains, and built cities on sand. So why not here? Engineers have considered three main options for linking Europe and Africa: a suspension bridge, a submerged floating tunnel, a deep-sea rail tunnel. Let's break down the first option, the bridge. A standard bridge simply would not work. The strait is too wide, too deep and too turbulent. To span 14 kilometers with no central support would require the largest suspension bridge in human history, with towers taller than the Burj Khalifa and anchorages deeper than any built today. Even Japan's Akashi Keikyo Bridge, the world's longest suspension bridge, is only 2 kilometers long. Gibraltar would require at least 7 times that, with far worse geological conditions. The second idea is more exotic: a submerged floating tunnel. This involves tubes suspended just below the surface, anchored to the seabed, or held in place with floating pontoons. Norway has considered this for its deep fjords, but no one has built one yet anywhere. The Strait of Gibraltar, with its strong underwater currents and depth changes, makes this method almost suicidal unless entirely new materials and AI-assisted stabilization systems are developed. So we arrive at the most realistic idea: the tunnel. A deep-sea tunnel, similar to the English Channel Tunnel, would run beneath the seabed. But unlike the Channel, which is 50 kilometers long and lies just 75 meters below the sea, a Gibraltar tunnel would need to go more than 900 meters deep in places through unstable, methane-rich rock. The tunnel would likely require entirely new tunneling technology and could cost upwards of $40 billion, not including maintenance or security. Despite the challenges, engineers around the world continue to study the strait, fascinated by the technical puzzle, because history shows us the impossible often becomes inevitable when enough people believe in it. There's another voice in this debate, and it is not human. The Strait of Gibraltar is one of the most ecologically sensitive marine zones on Earth. It serves as a migration corridor for whales, dolphins, tuna, and even sea turtles. It's a marine highway, not just for ships, but for life. Building a bridge or tunnel would disrupt that rhythm. Pile driving, underwater explosions, seismic probes, and heavy sediment displacement could shatter marine habitats. In particular, scientists warn of the danger to cetaceans, marine mammals who rely on sound to navigate. Construction noise, at the volumes required, could deafen whales and dolphins, causing mass strandings and fatal disorientation. Then there's the issue of pollution. A megabridge would lead to more road traffic, runoff, and industrial buildup along the coasts. A tunnel might need ventilation shafts that release vehicle exhaust near pristine shorelines. Environmentalists argue that a megastructure would destroy one of the last free-flowing intercontinental marine ecosystems left, and that such a project would be, in a sense, a victory of steel over soul. In 2009, a coalition of scientists from Spain and Morocco published a joint report titled "The Cost of Connection: What a Bridge Would Break." It outlined the likely extinction of several native fish species and a rise in coastal erosion if major construction took place. But not everyone agrees. Proponents argue that a tunnel built deep below the seafloor with modern technology could be relatively safe. If constructed properly, it might even reduce ferry traffic, which produces a constant roar of diesel pollution across the strait today. And some see opportunity in building marine monitoring stations alongside any new infrastructure, turning the megaproject into a science lab as well as a bridge. The question remains, is progress worth the cost? Is it possible to connect continents without severing the web of life between them? Or must nature always pay for our ambition? The Strait of Gibraltar is not just a natural boundary, it's a political fault line, a tense, symbolic division between two continents, two worldviews, and two long histories. On one side, Spain, a modern European democracy, member of the EU, NATO, and Schengen. On the other, Morocco, a rising North African power with growing ties to Europe, but a complex past with colonization, monarchy, and regional instability. Building a bridge or tunnel would mean more than just concrete. It would mean cooperation on immigration, trade, customs, law enforcement, and sovereignty. And that's where things get messy. One of the most contentious issues in Spanish-Moroccan relations is the status of Ceuta and Melilla, two Spanish cities on the northern coast of Africa. Morocco has long claimed them as part of its territory, while Spain maintains they are fully Spanish. This territorial dispute has caused multiple diplomatic breakdowns over the years. In 2021, Spain's decision to allow a Western Sahara independence leader to seek medical care in Madrid led to a border crisis in Ceuta, where thousands of migrants stormed the fences. Could you imagine such tension playing out on a bridge? A physical connection between Europe and Africa would raise fears among European nationalists of opening the floodgates. Meanwhile, African leaders might see it as a symbol of neo-colonialism, unless economic equity is baked into the deal. Beyond Spain and Morocco, there's the issue of Gibraltar, a British overseas territory at the mouth of the strait. The UK and Spain have disputed its sovereignty for centuries. Any mega-project across the strait would likely run close to Gibraltar's waters, dragging in yet another layer of international tension. To build a Europe-Africa link, dozens of treaties would need rewriting. Border policies would need harmonization, and trust, which has historically been fragile, would need to reach unprecedented levels. Right now, the bridge is just an idea, but even the politics of the idea are radioactive. If you ask an ordinary European why there's no bridge to Africa, the answer is not always technical or political. Often, it's about fear. If we build it, they will come. The Strait of Gibraltar is one of the busiest migration routes in the world. Every year, tens of thousands of people from sub-Saharan Africa, the Maghreb, and the Middle East attempt to reach Europe, fleeing poverty, war, or simply seeking opportunity. A Europe-Africa bridge, in the minds of many, would turn a trickle into a flood. But would it? Let's unpack the reality. First, any bridge or tunnel would not be open access. It would likely be a secure corridor, possibly for rail transit only, and equipped with customs and immigration control at both ends, just like international airports. Second, existing ferry routes already enable crossing, legally and illegally. The real issue is not the means of transit, but the conditions that drive people to migrate. Still, the optics of a bridge raise intense political alarm, particularly in an age of growing populism. In France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, the rise of anti-migrant political parties has led to border tightening, even within the EU. Building a physical connection to Africa, however secure, would feed narratives of a borderless Europe under siege. Meanwhile, human rights advocates argue the opposite, that a regulated, secure transit option could save lives. Each year, thousands drown in the Mediterranean trying to reach Europe via small, overcrowded boats. A controlled rail tunnel could offer legal, monitored channels for migration and asylum, reducing deaths and strengthening oversight. Then there's the question of economic migration. Many Moroccans already work in Spain. Would a fixed link boost the legal labor pipeline, Would it encourage remittance flows that support African economies? And how would the EU regulate such a link without expanding Schengen to include Morocco? A deeply complex diplomatic step. This chapter reveals a bitter truth. The dream of unity is often shackled by fear, and nowhere is that more visible than in the debate over migration. Now imagine you are not a migrant, not a tourist, not an engineer. You are a general, or a spy, or a diplomat. From this vantage point, the idea of a Europe-Africa bridge is not a dream. It's a strategic nightmare or opportunity, depending on where you sit. The Strait of Gibraltar is one of the world's most militarized choke points. More than 100,000 ships pass through it each year, carrying oil, gas, trade goods, and military hardware. The US Navy, the British Royal Navy, Spain's Armada, and NATO all consider it a critical defense line. A fixed link between continents could shift the balance of strategic access. Some analysts argue that such a bridge would require military protection, including missile defense systems, anti-submarine nets, and secure surveillance infrastructure. It would become a target in any future conflict, a critical asset vulnerable to sabotage, cyber attacks, or even bombings. Others argue the opposite, that connecting continents through trade and transit reduces the likelihood of war. Just as the EU grew from a coal and steel agreement into a peacekeeping alliance, some believe a Europe-Africa bridge could foster peace through commerce, creating interdependence that discourages aggression. There's also the issue of China. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, China has invested heavily in African ports, roads, and rail. Beijing might see a Europe-Africa connection as an opportunity or a threat to its strategic reach. Would Chinese investors seek a stake in the project? Would the US block it? And let's not forget the climate wars of the future. As climate change reshapes Africa's interior, displacing populations, drying rivers, and fueling food insecurity, pressure to migrate north will grow. A fixed corridor might become a lifeline or a battlefield, depending on who controls it. In short, a bridge is not just steel and cables, it's a strategic trigger. And right now, the world is not sure whether it would offer more peace or more peril. So far, we have talked about geography, politics, and fear. But there's one reason, bigger than all others, why this bridge doesn't exist: money. The Strait of Gibraltar is only 14 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, but building a bridge or tunnel across it could cost between $20 billion and $100 billion, depending on the design, depth, and technology used. Let's break it down. A massive suspension bridge, like the Akashi Kakyo in Japan, would require central towers over 1,000 meters tall because of the depth of the seabed and the need for large spans to allow ships through. That means engineering a structure twice the height of the Eiffel Tower underwater. On the other hand, a tunnel like the one proposed in the 1970s between Spain and Morocco would need to dig through unstable, seismic seabed layers. Experts in the Spanish-Moroccan feasibility study suggested a deep bored tunnel, 300 meters below the sea surface, one of the deepest in human history. Every meter of tunnel boring costs money. Every ton of reinforced steel raises the budget, and then there's maintenance. Such a structure would need 24/7 surveillance, climate control, security infrastructure, and regular repair. Seawater, corrosion, tectonic movement, and salt-laden winds would eat away at every bolt, beam, and wire. Critics argue that the return on investment ROI is not clear. The amount of traffic between Spain and Morocco, while busy, does not yet justify the massive cost. Compare that to the Channel Tunnel, which sees over 11 million passengers and 1.5 million trucks per year between the UK and France. Even that project took decades to break even. Who would pay for this megabridge? The EU, Spain alone, Morocco, a joint public-private fund, or perhaps China or Gulf states with an eye on future control. And would the project be profitable or simply symbolic? Some economists argue that rather than build a bridge, the better path is investing in digital infrastructure, renewable energy grids, and localized transportation that serve more people more quickly. But the dream persists, because while bridges cost billions, they also transform futures. Let's rewind history and cross the sea. In 1994, the Channel Tunnel, also known as the Channel, officially opened beneath the English Channel, linking Folkestone, England, to Calais, France. It stretches 50 kilometers, including 38 kilometers undersea, making it one of the longest underwater tunnels in the world. It took over 200 years of dreaming, 15,000 workers, and $21 billion adjusted for today to make it happen. But today, it's one of the most successful engineering projects in Europe. So, what lessons does it offer? 1. Bipartisanship is mandatory. Britain and France had to sign dozens of treaties, agree on border protocols, share costs, and align on safety and technical standards. Without this deep cooperation, the tunnel would have failed. 2. The private sector carried the load. The tunnel was built without a single taxpayer dollar, funded by private banks and investors. That made it controversial, but also shielded governments from upfront risk. 3. It was a political gamble. Margaret Thatcher supported the project as a symbol of European unity, even though she opposed many other EU initiatives. In France, it was seen as a badge of engineering pride. The tunnel became more than a transport project. It became a political symbol. Could something similar work between Europe and Africa? Perhaps. But the Channel Tunnel had one advantage the Gibraltar Plan doesn't. No tectonic fault lines. Plus, the UK and France, despite centuries of conflict, are both wealthy democracies with aligned legal systems. Spain and Morocco have a more volatile history and stark economic inequality. Still, the channel proves one thing. What seems impossible today may be inevitable tomorrow. From England to France, now let's head north. The Resund Bridge connects Copenhagen, Denmark, with Malmö, Sweden, stretching 8 kilometers across the icy waters of the Resund Strait. Completed in 2000, it's a hybrid structure, part bridge, part tunnel, with a man-made island in the middle. Unlike the Gibraltar idea, this one became reality and transformed to countries in the process. Here's how. 1. A vision of unity. Denmark and Sweden were already close allies, culturally, politically, and economically, but there were still stereotypes and historic rivalries. The bridge helped erase psychological distance, boosting tourism, migration, and bilateral business. 2. Return on investment. Since its opening, the Resund Bridge has enabled tens of thousands of commuters to live in one country and work in another. That's driven property booms, job creation, and shared prosperity. 3. Design and innovation. The Resund faced its own technical challenges: strong currents, winter ice, and flight paths near Copenhagen Airport. Engineers used a combined bridge tunnel approach, something the Gibraltar link might replicate. Could the Gibraltar project learn from this? Possibly, if the political will and financial model could align similarly. But there's a key difference. The Resund connects to nearly identical societies. Gibraltar would connect to radically different continents. Still, it proves one thing. When nations trust each other, even wild engineering dreams can come true. Imagine driving across a sleek steel bridge, and suddenly the world shifts. The language changes, the food spices up, the rhythm of life alters. That's not just geography, that's civilizational contrast. A bridge across Gibraltar would not just connect to continents, it would link to cultural worlds, Christian majority Europe and Muslim majority North Africa. Latin-based languages to Arabic and Amazigh, Western liberal democracies to monarchies and post-colonial republics. The symbolism is profound. Is it a bridge or a boundary? For some, it would represent hope, a literal path to dialogue, trade, migration, and mutual understanding. For others, it might be a source of fear, immigration waves, cultural dilution, or terrorism. That's the dilemma. Infrastructure does not just carry people and cargo, it carries meaning. Would this bridge unify or divide? So, what about digging underneath? The idea of a tunnel between Spain and Morocco is not new. In fact, both governments have proposed it multiple times, most notably in 1979, 2003, and 2019, but no digging has ever begun. Here's why. The geology is a nightmare. Unlike the English Channel, the Gibraltar seabed is riddled with unstable silt, volcanic rock, and a dangerous fault line. Tunneling through it is like trying to drill through a shaking bottle of soda, risky and expensive. Then there's the depth. To avoid interfering with busy shipping lanes, a tunnel would need to run over 300 meters beneath the sea, which is deeper than the Channel Tunnel or Japan's Sikan Tunnel. And here's the kicker. That area is one of the most seismically active zones in the Mediterranean. Earthquakes aren't just possible, they're expected. Would a train tunnel survive a magnitude 6.5 quake, even if the engineering was possible? And some say it is. The political instability in North Africa has put every plan on pause. So far, every feasibility study ends the same way. Too risky, too costly, too political. Not yet. What if the solution isn't a bridge or tunnel at all? Welcome to the next frontier of infrastructure. Hyperloop technology. Elon Musk's Hyperloop idea has evolved into a real field of competition. Companies in Europe, Canada, and the UAE are racing to create vacuum-sealed pods that could travel at 700 plus miles per hour, faster than jets, cheaper than rail. Could a floating Hyperloop system connect Spain and Morocco one day? It would eliminate deep-sea drilling, offer higher efficiency, and potentially reduce political friction with modular, mobile ports. Floating bridge concepts. Another idea gaining traction is a floating bridge anchored by pontoons, like the Lake Washington Bridge in Seattle. While rare in open seas, tech advancements in buoyancy materials and AI-controlled wave response systems are making this more realistic. AI-driven infrastructure. Modern megaprojects now rely on machine learning for real-time stress detection, predictive repair systems, and dynamic traffic routing. An AI-managed Gibraltar crossing could adapt to weather, earthquakes, and even political closures with unprecedented resilience. We are not stuck in the 20th century anymore. If Europe and Africa ever do connect, it may not be with bricks and beams. but with algorithms and airlocks. Look again at the Strait of Gibraltar. It's not just a transportation corridor. It's a sustainability goldmine, solar megaproject potential. North Africa is one of the sunniest regions on Earth. Morocco already has Ouarzazate, one of the world's largest solar farms. Linking it with European grids could provide clean energy to millions. A Gibraltar crossing could double as an energy corridor, carrying solar, wind, and hydrogen pipelines from Africa to Europe. Wind and tidal power. The strait has fierce, consistent winds and strong tidal flows, perfect conditions for offshore wind farms and tidal energy platforms. Incorporating those into the bridge would turn it into a power plant, not just a road. Green freight corridors. Instead of trucks belching diesel, imagine electric freight lanes, battery swapping stations, and autonomous green cargo systems running silently across the strait. With climate change looming, any new megaproject must not just connect continents, it must safeguard the planet. In the 1980s, Spain and Morocco agreed on a tunnel study. In 2006, they signed another memorandum. In 2023, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro said talks were back on. So why hasn't anything happened? Simple: diplomatic inertia. Spain and Morocco have had a rocky relationship, from territorial disputes over Ceuta and Melilla to sudden border closures and migration spats, and the EU, while it has funded smaller feasibility studies, it's reluctant to back a megaproject that connects the continent to a politically fragile neighbor. Meanwhile, Morocco is caught between European pressure and African solidarity, unsure whether a project like this would deepen ties or provoke criticism from the global south. It's not just engineering that stops this bridge, it's distrust. Let's ask the hard question. Could this bridge become a military target? Yes, in fact, that fear is one of the top arguments against building it. Strategic vulnerability. A bridge or tunnel between Spain and Morocco would instantly become one of the most strategically sensitive assets in the Mediterranean. A target for terrorism, cyber attacks, and sabotage. NATO concerns. Spain is a member of NATO. Morocco is not. Would NATO have to defend the bridge if it were attacked? What if a future conflict broke out in North Africa? Would NATO be pulled into it? Militarization. To protect the structure, both countries would need to militarize it. Radar towers, missile defense, naval patrols. That adds cost, tension, and geopolitical risk. A megabridge might make sense on paper, but on the battlefield of realpolitik, it might be a liability. Meet Amina, a Moroccan student in Tangier. Every day she dreams of studying in Spain. She can almost see the coast from her window, but she can't reach it. Meet Carlos, a fisherman in Tarifa. He used to sail across for trade. Now he watches migrants risk their lives daily on the same route. To them, this isn't about steel or asphalt. It's about opportunity, humanity, hope. Amina says, if there was a train, I could visit my cousins in Granada, study at university, come home on weekends. Carlos says, if the bridge came, maybe I'd get work in maintenance. My kids would not have to leave for Madrid. This is the silent story, the forgotten lives between geopolitics and blueprints. Whatever decision comes, it must listen to them, not just engineers and presidents. So, let's ask it plainly. Will a bridge ever be built between Europe and Africa? Right now, probably not. But in 10 years, 50 years, a century, maybe. Because dreams have strange power. They wait, they whisper, and sometimes, even after decades of delay, they become destiny. The Strait of Gibraltar has witnessed thousands of years of human movement. Phoenicians, Romans, Moors, Crusaders, migrants. Maybe one day it will witness the greatest crossing of all. A bridge, not of steel alone, but of trust, vision, and shared future. The only question left is the world ready to walk across.